All right, so today we're going to be talking about the phase shift, right? So we're going to introduce phase shift today and then vertical shift tomorrow, okay? Biggest thing what I want you to do is now that we're introducing a phase shift, okay, look at our new equation here and vertical shift, okay? We added on. So before it was just A sine B theta. Now we're adding in A minus C plus D, or A cosine B theta minus C plus D. Now, I wish I could say exactly that C is our phase shift, but that is not 100% true. Okay, it helps us find the phase shift. Okay, it helps us find the phase shift, right? So phase shift or horizontal shift, C tells you the phase shift direction is opposite of what you think. You must factor out the B to see the phase shift. Now, in this case here, this first example here, sine theta minus 3 pi over 4, okay? When B is equal to 1, okay, when B is equal to 1, there's no factoring out, all right? So what I see from this first right here, okay, is that my B is equal to 1, all right? So then that means when you find the period, remember your period then is equal to 2 pi over B, so then 2 pi over 1, so 2 pi, okay? So the total distance we're going to travel is 2 pi. All right. My phase shift, okay, my phase shift is just this value opposite every time. Okay, just this value opposite every time if we can't factor anything out. So in this case, we can't factor anything out because it's just a 1. So therefore, my phase shift, okay, my phase shift is equal to opposite of that, which opposite sign, right? Because what does it say here, okay? The direction is opposite of what you think. Opposite of what you think. So that means that my phase shift, okay, my phase shift then is equal to 3 pi over 4. Okay? And so your phase shift is where you are starting. Okay? So phase shift equals 3 pi over 4, okay, start. All right. Now we need to come up with some intervals as well. So our intervals are going to be equal to what? The period over 4. Okay, so we're going to go 2 pi over 4, which then gives you, what, pi over 2? Okay. So then now normally, what do? We would go from our starting point, which was 0, and we would just add whatever our intervals are. Well, now we're starting at 3 pi over 4, and we're going to add pi over 2. Okay, so that's where the calculator comes in. So I'm going to go fraction button, 3 pi over 4, plus, not ln, sorry, pi over 2, hit enter, and there we go. So it's going to be 5 pi over 4. Okay, and then you're going to take 5 pi over 4. And you're going to add pi over 2. 7 pi over 4. And so this pattern, I think I see what's going on, right? So then this is going to be 9 pi over 4. And then this is going to be 11 pi over 4. Now, to know if you did this correctly, okay, you can go ahead in your calculator. You can take to find the period, make sure you do this correctly. You can do 11 pi over 4 minus, so 11 pi over 4 minus our starting point there, 3 pi over 4, and that should give me 2 pi, and it does. So that total distance from 3 pi over 4 to 11 pi over 4 is 2 pi, which is what we did correctly. Okay? Now, recall, A in this case is just a 1, so it's not going to change my pattern whatsoever. So let's recall what my pattern is for sine. It's just 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. Okay, so again, here's my x-axis, here's my y-axis. Let's go ahead and let's graph. I'm going to start it over this way. And let's go ahead and label it. So we're going to go 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, 9 pi over 4, and then 11 pi over 4. Okay? And then again, on my amplitude in this case, there's no a values, it's just 1 or -1. And let's go ahead and let's graph. So we got 3 pi over 4, 0. 5 pi over 4, 1. 7 pi over 4, 0. 9 pi over 4, -1. And then 11 pi over 4, 0. And just go ahead and graph. And so there you go. So there is number 1. Okay? All right, now, for number 2, again, we need to go ahead and let's find our period first. So remember, the period is equal to 2 pi over b. In this case, b is a 2, so we got 2 pi over 2, then which equals pi. So that's our period. Okay, that's our period. Now, for our phase shift, though, we need to go ahead and we need to factor out. So for our phase shift here, we're going to take this equation, this cosine, but we're factoring out a 2. And so when we factor out that 2, and why am I factoring out a 2? Because that's what b is. You always go ahead and just factor out b if it's not a 1. So what that means is when I factor something out, I just divide what's inside the parentheses both by 2 there. And so when I do that then, that means now my phase shift, when I write my equation out, is now I'm going to have this. I'm going to have y equals cosine, okay, brackets 2, and then in parentheses theta, because I factored the 2 out, right, plus pi over 2. Okay, plus pi over 2. That's all I did was I factored it out. And so what that's telling me now is now I can determine what my phase shift is. Because I factored it out, okay, my phase shift is always going to be opposite of that c. Okay, once you factor it out, then you look at the c value and you say, okay, opposite of that. So then my phase shift then is equal to a negative pi over 2. Okay, so I take opposite of that pi over 2, so I'm starting at a negative pi over 2. Now, the next thing I need to find too is I need to find my intervals. So recall, how do I find my intervals? That, again, is period over 4. Why am I finding my intervals? I need to be able to label my x-axis. So the period is pi over 4, and so your intervals are going to go up by pi over 4. Okay? All right, so that means I'm starting here at negative pi over 2, and I'm adding pi over 4. So when I add negative pi over 2 to pi over 4, and you can use your calculator for this, you get a negative pi over 4. When I do a negative pi over 4 plus pi over 4, that gives me 0. When I do 0 plus pi over 4, that gives me pi over 4. And when I do pi over 4 plus pi over 4, that gives me pi over 2. Okay? Again, we don't have an a value out front, so that's not going to affect my pattern at all. So we just need to remember our pattern for cosine. So our pattern for cosine is 1, 0, negative 1, 0, 1. Now let's go ahead and let's graph. So this time it's going to be on both sides here. So that's why I kind of draw it in the middle. So you're going to label. So negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, 0, pi over 2, pi over 4. My amplitude was my max. It goes all the way up to 1. My minimum goes down to a negative 1. Okay, and recall again, x, y, x, y. Okay? So now let's go ahead and let's graph. So negative pi over 2, 1. Negative pi over 4, 0. 0, negative 1. Pi over, and I'm sorry, I messed up with my labeling over here. It should be pi over 4 first, then pi over 2. Pi over 4, 0. And then pi over 2, 1. And there you go, right? So there is your cosine graph, which normally if we didn't have a phase shift there, guys, it would have started right at 0. But all I did was I pulled it to the left, pi over 2. All right? And so you have a phase shift there at negative pi over 2, which is where our new graph starts. Okay, so to recall, all right, if we have the opportunity to factor out a b, we need to factor out a b. Once we factor out that b, Okay? Once we factor out that b, we can then look at the c value and just take the opposite of that right away. Okay? If you can't factor out the b because it's a 1, then you automatically just go look at c and you just take the opposite. Okay? And then once you have that labeled out, again, it said our period was pi for that last problem. If I take the end minus the start, so if I do pi over 2 minus, and then remember that where we started was a negative pi over 2. Look what happens here. I should get pi for my period, and I do. So that means I did it correctly, right? Because my period was a total of pi, right? I started phase shift here, negative pi over 2 after I factored out that 2. That's the biggest thing you have to remember, okay? And the other good news is, guys, is that now we are going to just practice this a lot over the next couple of days, okay, to really get this down, all right? So not that long of a lesson today, which was good. And I will see you guys tomorrow in class to go over more of this thing. All right, thanks. Bye.